Imagine finding like a squatter living in an abandoned apartment and they're just super scrappy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Surviving on practically nothing, just making the absolute most of this totally forgotten space.
Totally. Just making it work.
Exactly. But then the moment you take that exact same squatter and you put them in this luxury mansion.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right. You hire a private chef, give them every resource imaginable, and they completely starve.
Which, I mean, on the surface, that doesn't make any logical sense at all.
It makes zero sense. But, well, today we are looking at a hyper-specific, honestly, remarkably brief journal entry about a weed that does exactly that.
It really does.
And we're going to see what this tiny green squatter can actually teach us about, our obsession with trying to control the world around us. So welcome to today's deep dive.
Thanks. And our mission for you today is a little bit unusual, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely not our standard fare.
Right, because we aren't analyzing some, massive sociological study or dense historical biography today.
No 500-page books this time.
Exactly. We are taking a microscope to a very, very brief, I think it's like 120 words online journal entry, and it was published exactly today, July 22, 2026.
Fresh off the press.
Yep. Written by an author who simply goes by the name Ang.
Just Ang.
Just Ang. And it's this tiny, unassuming window into one person's backyard. But it reveals this fascinating paradox about nature, human intention, and, well, really the actual mechanics of survival.
Yeah, the title of the entry alone is great. It's called Notes on Gardening, Part 963, Propagating Yellow Woodsorrel, Oxalis-corniculata.
And you have to notice that question mark right at the end of the title. It's key.
Yes, the question mark is crucial. But wait, before we even get to the woodsorrel part, I really have to point out the context here.
The numbering.
Yes, part 963. I mean, that is 963 individual dispatches about the micro details of a single garden.
It's just a phenomenal level of dedication.
It really is. There is just something profoundly grounding about someone taking the time to, observe the quiet things happening in the dirt, especially on that kind of scale.
Yeah, because when you spend that much time observing one single ecosystem, you stop seeing just dirt and plants, right?
Right, you see the matrix.
Basically, yeah. You start seeing the actual underlying biological machinery at work.
Yeah.
And while this specific post from Ang it's literally just a couple of paragraphs, it acts as this perfect case study.
For sure.
Because on the surface, sure, it's about gardening. But fundamentally, we are really examining the tension between the jobs we want nature to do and the specialized survival strategies that nature employs when we aren't looking.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this and get right into what Ang actually observed today.
Let's do it.
So Ang writes about noticing this specific plant, the yellow woodsorrel, or what was the scientific name?
Oxalis-corniculate.
Right, that one. Anyway, Ang notices it growing wildly just here and there. It's just doing its own thing in the yard.
Just existing.
Yeah, but the detail that really stood out to me is that Ang managed to obtain a few pots of this plant because it had started growing entirely on its own out of an existing empty pot.
Right.
Like, several distinct plants just decided to sprout in this specific, supposedly empty container.
What's fascinating here is how human beings perceive space versus how nature actually perceives it.
Oh, I like that. What do you mean?
Well, to the human gardener, that terracotta pot was empty, right?
Yeah.
It was just a void.
Right. Just a sad, empty pot sitting on a patio.
Exactly. Because we look at an unplanted pot and we just see a blank canvas that strictly requires our intervention.
Oh, definitely.
We think it's just sitting there waiting for, a prized tomato plant or some carefully curated petunias.
Exactly. To us, it's that abandoned building. But to the wild wood sorrel that's just like drifting along on the breeze, it was a perfectly vacant home.
Yep. Move in ready.
It was prime real estate, just this unguarded, nutrient-rich pile of dirt. The plant didn't care that it wasn't explicitly invited by the gardener. It just moved in and set up shop.
And we should really talk about the biological mechanics of why that happens, because empty is purely a human concept.
Nature doesn't do empty.
Right. In ecology, that forgotten pot is what we'd call a highly disturbed environment.
Disturbed, like emotionally.
No, physically. The soil has been churned up, it's been isolated, and it's just left totally exposed to the elements.
Okay, got it.
And in the botanical world, there is a very specific class of plants designed specifically for these exact environments. They are known as ruderal species.
Ruderal. Okay, I'm not familiar with that term. What does that mean in practice?
So ruderal actually comes from the Latin word for rubble.
Oh, wow. Rubble. That paints a picture.
Right. These are basically the first responders of the botanical world.
First responders, I love that.
Yeah, so a ruderal plant doesn't invest its energy into building a massive woody trunk or like these deep, complex root systems.
Right, because why would it?
Exactly. Instead, it invests almost all of its biological energy into rapid growth and rapid seed production.
Built for speed.
Completely. It is genetically programmed to find empty, disturbed spaces, like our forgotten pond, pollinize them instantly, and just throw out as many seeds as possible
For what?
before a larger, stronger plant
Uh-huh.
eventually comes along and casts a shadow over it.
Oh, so they really are basically built for speed. They aren't gearing up for a long-term fight at all.
Not even a little bit.
They're just trying to exploit the gaps where literally nothing else is growing yet.
Precisely. And actually, yellow woodsorrel is really famous for a mechanism called ballistockery.
Ballista what?
Ballistockery.
It's wild.
When its seed pods mature, they literally explode.
Wait, literally explode?
Literally. They shoot these tiny seeds several feet into the air.
Oh my God. Like tiny botanical grenades.
Yes, it's this incredibly opportunistic spray-and-pray strategy. The plant is constantly launching scouts to find the next empty pot.
That is amazing. Which obviously makes them incredible survivors. I mean, they find the margins, the completely forgotten corners of our domestic spaces, and they thrive on pure neglect.
Pure neglect, exactly.
But, okay, if this weed is such an incredible, highly efficient survivor in a barren terracotta pot,
Yeah.
you'd think it would absolutely dominate if we actually planted it deliberately in, like, a lush garden bed, right?
You would think that, yes.
Yet Ang's notes reveal the exact opposite.
Yeah, this is where the biological paradox really reveals itself.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Ang writes that in the past, they actually tried to cultivate this exact yellow woodsorrel intentionally.
Which is such a funny image to me.
Yeah.
Cultivating a weed.
Right. They wanted to use it as a ground cover in the main garden, but it completely failed.
Just totally tanked.
Ang explicitly notes that the woodsorrel couldn't sustain its own growth and failed to spread to the surrounding areas because, and this is a quote, it was outcompeted by other aggressive weeds.
It's just a brilliant piece of irony.
Totally.
The exact same plant that conquers the barren, neglected pot completely collapses when you give it premium real estate and human attention.
Right. I kept trying to conceptualize why that would happen, and it felt to me a bit like stage fright.
Stage fright. How so?
Well, think about like an indie musician who is absolutely incredible when they are playing acoustic sets down in the subway.
Okay, I'm with you.
Right. They thrive in the margins. They're playing in the dark corners where nobody expects them to be, and they kill it.
Sure.
But then a massive record label comes along, puts them on a huge stadium stage with glaring lights, and says, okay, perform your specific job for the masses. And they just freeze. They choke under the pressure. This woodsorrel thrives as a rebel in an empty pot, but when Ang puts it center stage and asks it to be official ground cover, it gets stage fright and gets outcompeted by the heavy metal bands of the weed world.
It's a really fun image, but, well, plants don't actually get stage fright.
I mean, fair enough.
The indie musician analogy works, but not because the woodsorrel is freezing out of fear or, like, performance pressure.
Okay, so what's actually happening then?
It's simply a matter of volume and biological strategy. Yeah, so put that acoustic indie act on a stadium stage next to a heavy metal band with 10-foot amplifiers. The acoustic act isn't freezing. They're just being completely drowned out.
Oh, they're playing, you just can't hear them.
Exactly. Biologically, what's happening in that garden bed is a brutal mismatch of plant strategies.
Wait, I'm stuck on this. If the woodsorrel is technically a weed, why doesn't it fight like one?
Well,
Aren't all weeds generically programmed to just aggressively take over whatever space they are in?
not at all. And that's actually a super common misconception.
Really?
Yeah. We just talked about the woodsorrel being a ruderal species,
Right.
right? A plant built to run fast and colonize empty space.
Right, the first responder.
But the garden bed is not empty space. The garden bed is a microscopic war zone,
A war zone.
literally. When Ang tried to make the woodsorrel act as ground cover, they threw it into an arena with plants that use a completely different strategy, the competitive strategy.
Okay, so how does a competitive weed differ from a ruderal weed like our little woodsorrel?
Well, a competitive plant doesn't waste all its energy exploding seeds into the air.
No tiny grenades for them?
No, instead, it invests its energy downward and outward.
Yeah.
It builds deep, aggressive taproots that just steal nitrogen and water from everything around it.
Wow, just ruthless.
Very. and it grows broad, thick leaves, specifically designed to act like solar panels that cast shade, literally starving shorter plants of sunlight.
That's terrifying.
It gets worse. Some competitive weeds even engage in allelopathy.
Allelopathy?
Yeah, which is essentially chemical warfare.
You're kidding.
Nope. They release biochemicals into the soil directly from their roots that actively stunt the germination of rival plants.
Oh my gosh. So the woodsorrel didn't freeze. It literally just brought a pair of running shoes to a gladiator fight.
Exactly. The woodsorrel, having spent all of its evolutionary energy on just finding empty pots, simply lacks the biological muscle to fight in a crowded arena.
That is so sad, but it makes total sense.
Yeah, when Aang placed it in the garden bed and expected it to act like this dense, aggressive ground cover, it was starved of sunlight, robbed of water, and just completely crowded out by plants that are mathematically designed to win turf wars.
That makes perfect sense now. It's not a failure of the plant itself. It's a total failure of placement.
Exactly.
The human gardener assigned a job to the plant that contradicted its entire evolutionary playbook, which, really makes me wonder about Aang's reaction to all of this in today's journal entry.
Right. How do you handle that failure?
Let's review the facts Aang laid out for us. The plant failed as a useful ground cover in the past.
Yep.
It totally lost the turf war. It proved it absolutely couldn't do the job Aang wanted it to do.
Right.
So when Aang sees this exact same plant suddenly reappearing today, just squatting in an empty pot,
Right.
what is the normal gardener's reaction to that?
Oh, the typical reaction is instant eradication.
Right. Rip it out.
The eradicator mindset totally dominates modern gardening. If a plant defies the master landscaping plan, or if it has previously proven to be useless for your specific aesthetic goals,
Yeah.
you just rip it out and throw it in the compost pile.
Exactly. It's a weed that didn't even have the decency to be a useful weed when you explicitly asked it to be.
Yeah, get rid of it.
But that is not what Aang does.
No, it's not.
And maybe this is the specific wisdom you only acquire when you've written 963 posts just observing the dirt.
I think you're right.
Because instead of throwing the wild sprouts away, Aang looks at this pot and writes that it will be rather interesting to observe this specimen.
Fascinating.
Aang actually decides to figure out how to propagate it locally and then just casually signs off. Till the next post, yours truly, Aang.
It is a complete paradigm shift.
So what does this all mean?
Well, what we're seeing in those few words is a profound pivot from an extraction mindset to an observational mindset.
I love that. It feels like Aang is acting like a very curious sports coach.
Oh, how so?
Imagine a coach studying this quirky underdog player. And this player completely failed in the major leagues, like when they tried the ground cover experiment. But they have this undeniable, absolutely fascinating technique when they were just messing around in the minor leagues in that empty pot.
Right.
Why spend time intentionally propagating a plant that you already know can't do the heavy lifting in the main garden?
Because Aang is dropping the demand for utility.
Dropping the demand for utility.
Yeah. This raises a really important question about the value of knowledge and observation strictly for its own sake.
Okay, elaborate on that.
In the past, Aang was looking at the woodsorrel and essentially asking, what can this plant do for me? How can it serve my landscaping needs?
Right, making it earn its keep.
Exactly, and that is an extraction mindset. We view nature simply as a tool. But now, seeing it thrive completely on its own terms in an empty pot, Aang embraces pure scientific curiosity.
Shifting from being a manager who just dictates what happens to being a scientist who just wants to understand how things work natively.
Exactly. Aang decides to learn how the plant propagates locally, simply to understand the mechanism of its survival.
That's beautiful, really.
By asking how to propagate it locally, Aang is shifting from trying to dominate the landscape to trying to read it.
Wow.
It takes a remarkable amount of maturity and really ecological empathy to look at a past failure, a plant that frustrated your plans. And instead of feeling resentment, you feel a sense of wonder.
Yeah.
Aang is essentially saying, you didn't do what I wanted you to do, but look at what you are doing natively. Let me study that.
I really love that phrasing, dropping the demand for utility. It immediately makes me think of how we treat so many things in our daily lives, far beyond just gardening.
Oh, absolutely. We do this everywhere.
We are so obsessed with optimization. Like, we want our relaxing hobbies to eventually become profitable side hustles.
Yeah, the muscle
We want our daily mental health walks to count towards a fitness ring on our smartwatches.
God forbid we just take a walk.
Right. We constantly demand that our surroundings, our time, and even the people around us be strictly useful to some grand, overarching plan.
We try to turn everything into ground cover.
Yes, we try to make everything ground cover. And here is Ang on post number 963 looking at a tiny yellow weed in a forgotten clay pot and essentially saying, I'm just going to watch this little thing and figure out how it works, not because it helps my garden, but just because it's there.
It is incredibly grounding.
It really is.
And biologically speaking, observing how a plant propagates locally actually teaches you invaluable lessons about your specific microclimate.
Really? Like what?
Well, when you stop importing exotic plants from halfway across the world and forcing them to survive with chemical fertilizers,
Right.
and instead you start looking at the ruderal species that naturally colonize your empty spaces, you actually learn about the moisture, the wind patterns, and the soil composition of your own backyard.
So Ang is letting the environment act as the teacher.
Partnering with the underdog weed instead of fighting it.
That is so profound. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to remind you, the listener, just how much narrative, biological science, and hidden philosophy is packed into what is literally a 120-word dispatch from today.
It's a lot for 120 words.
It really is. We started with the sheer dedication of writing part 963. We explored the opportunistic real estate grab of a squatter in an empty pot and learned about the high-speed survival strategy of a ruderal plant species.
The first responders?
Exactly. We corrected my stage fright analogy to understand the brutal underground resource wars between competitive plants. And finally, we witnessed a profound pivot from the frustration of a manager trying to force a plant to be ground cover to the pure, open-ended curiosity of an observer.
And this is where we really want to bring it back directly to you.
Yeah.
Take a moment to look at your own immediate surroundings today. We all have these empty pots in our lives, minor daily occurrences, tiny frustrations, or spaces we perceive as voids or failures just because they aren't serving our immediate goal.
Right, things we overlook.
Exactly. What are you ignoring right now that might actually hold a fascinating lesson if you just stop demanding it be useful and shift it into an observational mindset?
Just watching it.
What would happen if you decided to study the things that are growing wildly in the margins of your own life?
It definitely changes how you look at a blank slate. You realize it's never actually blank. There is always a tiny, invisible ecosystem at work right under our noses, waiting to be understood rather than managed.
Indeed. And I want to leave you with a final lingering thought inspired by Ang's notes today.
Okay, let's hear it.
We saw that this wild entity, this wood sorrel, only thrived when it was largely ignored in a forgotten pot. But it completely collapsed and was actively cultivated, placed in the center of the garden, and expected to perform a specific job as ground cover.
Right, it lost the gladiator fight.
What does that tell us about the nature of our own intentions?
Mm.
Do we sometimes accidentally smother the very things, whether they are fragile new ideas, nascent creative projects, or even the natural passions of the people around us, simply by pulling them out of the empty pots where they naturally thrive?
Wow, by trying too hard to force them to grow in the exact way we mapped out.
Exactly. Sometimes the absolute best way to help something thrive is to stop trying to manage it and just watch it grow.
Until the next deep dive.